At first glance, the Valerius family looked like any other billionaire dynasty. They owned private islands, traveled in jets that cost more than most skyscrapers, hosted dinners where presidents and royalty sat at the same table, and disappeared from public view whenever the cameras became too interested. For more than a century, their name had appeared quietly in the background of history. Banks they funded became global institutions. Companies they invested in became industry leaders. Governments that once ignored them eventually came asking for advice, yet very few people had ever heard of them. And that was exactly how they wanted it. Their story began in 1891, when a young shipping merchant named Elias Valerius arrived in Europe with almost nothing except a small inheritance and an extraordinary ability to predict where money would move before anyone else could see it. While other businessmen invested in factories, Elias invested in the infrastructure surrounding them: railroads, ports, insurance warehouses, credit. He understood something simple that would eventually make his family unimaginably wealthy. Owning the product was profitable. Owning the system that moved the product was far more powerful. Within 30 years, Elias had built a financial empire stretching across several countries. But Elias did not celebrate his fortune with enormous parties or public monuments. Instead, he built a private estate in the mountains and created a family rule. No Valerius would ever become famous. No family member would publicly seek political office. No member would boast about their wealth. And most importantly, the family would never control one company. They would control pieces of hundreds. Generation after generation followed those rules. By the time the modern world arrived, the Valerius fortune had become almost impossible to calculate. The family owned stakes in shipping companies, technology firms, energy producers, luxury brands, agricultural businesses, private banks, real estate groups, and investment funds. But none of those businesses carried the Valerius name. That was the genius of the system. To an ordinary person, they appeared unrelated. To the Valerius family, they were pieces of the same machine. One rainy evening, 24-year-old Adrian Valerius was summoned to the Atlas Room. He had spent most of his life trying to escape the family. He studied architecture. He lived in a modest apartment. He drove an ordinary car. He had even refused his father's offer to buy him a private jet. Adrian believed his family was simply rich, extremely rich, but still just another billionaire family. Then his grandfather opened a metal cabinet. Inside was a collection of documents. The oldest was dated 1913. The newest had been printed only hours earlier. His grandfather placed them on the table. "Do you know what these are?" he asked. Adrian shook his head. "They are decisions." "Decisions about what?" "Everything." His grandfather pointed to the oldest document. It described a shipping crisis that had occurred more than a century earlier. The Valerius family had predicted it 6 months before the public knew anything was wrong. They purchased ports. They financed alternative shipping routes. They provided emergency loans. And when the crisis finally arrived, businesses across several countries suddenly depended on them. Adrian stared at the documents. "You're saying our family caused it?" His grandfather smiled. "No, then what did we do?" "We prepared for it." That answer frightened Adrian more than the alternative, because the documents showed that the family had been preparing for crisis after crisis: wars, financial crashes, energy shortages, technological revolutions, market collapses. Each time, the Valerius family appeared in the background. They did not always predict what would happen. Sometimes they simply prepared for every possible outcome. That was their secret. They did not need to control the future. They positioned themselves so that almost any future would benefit them. But Adrian discovered something even more disturbing. The family had recently changed its strategy. The new generation believed that the greatest fortune of the 21st century would not belong to whoever owned the most land. It would belong to whoever understood the flow of information. And Adrian's father was already building that future. His name was Marcus Valerius. Unlike his father, Marcus was not mysterious, he was charming. He appeared at international conferences. He donated millions to universities. He funded hospitals. Journalists described him as one of the world's most private billionaires. But behind closed doors, Marcus was transforming the family empire. He purchased stakes in companies developing artificial intelligence systems. He invested in renewable energy. He funded satellite technology. He quietly acquired farmland in several countries. And he created a private research organization known as Meridian. Officially, Meridian was a philanthropic foundation. Its public mission was to study global economic stability. But inside the family, Meridian had another purpose. It was the family's early warning system. Thousands of researchers analyzed markets, political trends, supply chains, technological developments, and demographic changes. The family did not need to know everything. They only needed to know what could become important. Then came the event that changed everything. One morning, Marcus called Adrian into his office. There were no assistants, no security guards, only the two of them. Marcus placed a tablet on the desk. On the screen was a map of the world. Thousands of lines connected cities, ports, energy facilities, data centers, and financial markets. "This is our real fortune," Marcus said. Adrian stared at the map. "I thought our fortune was money. Money is just a measurement. Then what is this? Influence." Adrian remained silent. Marcus continued. "People think power belongs to presidents. They think it belongs to billionaires with the largest companies. They think it belongs to celebrities or political leaders." He paused. "Real power belongs to whoever can remain important when everyone else becomes desperate." Adrian finally understood why the family had remained invisible. Fame was a liability. Power worked better when nobody noticed it. But there was one problem. Adrian did not agree with his father. He believed the family's strategy had gone too far. They were not simply investing anymore. They were beginning to influence the systems themselves. Adrian discovered that Meridian had developed predictive software, capable of identifying economic instability, months before traditional institutions. The system could identify which industries were likely to collapse, which regions might experience shortages, which companies were vulnerable, which technologies were about to explode in value, and the family had access to all of it. "What happens if you are wrong?" Adrian asked his father. Marcus looked at him. "Then we lose money. And if you are right, we make money." "That's not what I mean." Marcus understood. Adrian was not asking about profit. He was asking about consequences. If the family knew that a company was going to fail, should they invest in its competitor? If they knew a region might experience a food shortage, should they purchase farmland before prices rose? If they knew a technology would transform an industry, should they quietly buy everything connected to it? At some point, preparation became manipulation. Marcus did not answer. Instead, he gave Adrian a warning. Never confuse knowing what may happen with having the right to control it. Then Marcus revealed something Adrian had never expected. The family had a rival. Eventually, the competition reached the technology sector. Both families wanted control of a revolutionary energy storage company. The technology could dramatically reduce the cost of storing renewable electricity. Whoever controlled it could influence the future of energy. The Orsinists made an enormous offer. The Valeriuses responded with an even larger one. The company suddenly became the most valuable private technology company in the world. Then Adrian did something unexpected. He met the company's founder. Instead of discussing money, Adrian asked him one question. "What do you want your invention to become?" The founder answered immediately. "I want it to belong to everyone." That sentence changed Adrian. He returned home and confronted his father. "We should stop." Marcus looked disappointed. "Stop what?" "Trying to own the future." "We don't own the future." "Then prove it." For the first time in generations, a Valerius challenged the family's fundamental philosophy. Adrian proposed something radical. Instead of purchasing the energy company, the family would fund it without taking control. They would provide capital. They would protect the founders. They would help build factories, but the technology would remain independent. Marcus rejected the idea. Then, Adrian went to his grandfather. The old patriarch listened quietly. When Adrian finished, his grandfather walked to the bookshelf and removed the family's oldest document. It was the same document Elias Valerius had written more than a century earlier. Adrian expected to see instructions about money. Instead, he found one sentence: "Fortune is valuable only when it survives the generation that created it." His grandfather looked at him. "Your great-great-grandfather understood something we forgot." "What?" "Money is not the legacy." Adrian waited. "The choices are." That night, the family held its annual private meeting. Every senior member attended. For generations, these meetings had been predictable: investment decisions, risk assessments, acquisitions, political developments. But this time, Adrian entered the room carrying a proposal. He wanted the Valerius family to change. No more hidden control, no more buying influence simply because they could, no more treating global crises as opportunities, without considering the people affected. Instead, the family would use its wealth to build systems that could survive without them: hospitals, research institutions, energy infrastructure, education, technology, food security, and independent foundations that would eventually operate without Valerius ownership. Some family members opposed him. Others laughed. A few threatened to remove him from the inheritance. Then his grandfather stood. Everyone became silent. "I have spent 70 years protecting this family," he said. "But protection can become imprisonment." He looked at Adrian. "The world does not need another family that secretly controls everything." Then he looked around the room. "It needs families wealthy enough to solve problems without needing to own the solutions." The vote lasted 3 hours. By midnight, the decision was made. The Valerius family would remain wealthy, they would remain powerful, they would continue investing. But they would stop pursuing control as an end in itself. Over the next decade, billions of dollars flowed into public interest projects, research laboratories opened, hospitals expanded. Energy projects reached remote communities. Scholarships funded students who would never have otherwise attended elite universities. The family did not suddenly become saints. They still owned private jets. They still traveled to private islands. They still lived in extraordinary luxury. Their estate remained hidden in the mountains. Their private aircraft continued to cross oceans. Their dinners still included people most of the world would recognize instantly. But something changed. The family stopped trying to remain invisible at all costs. And Adrian became the first Valerius to speak publicly about the family's philosophy. During an interview, the journalist asked him the question everyone had been asking for years: "Does your family secretly rule the world?" Adrian smiled. "No." The journalist looked surprised. "Then why do so many people believe it?" "Because people often mistake influence for control." "So your family has no control?" Adrian paused. "We have influence. We have resources. We have opportunities that most people will never have." He leaned toward the microphone. "But no family controls the world. Not even yours? Especially not mine." The interview became famous. Some people believed him, others did not. Conspiracy theories continued. They always would, because the truth about extraordinary wealth is less dramatic than people imagine. There does not need to be a secret room where billionaires gather to control every event. Power can emerge from ownership, networks, relationships, information, timing, access, and sometimes, simply having enough money to wait while everyone else is forced to make a decision. The Valerius family understood that better than almost anyone. Their greatest secret was never that they ruled the world, it was that they understood how the world moved. And perhaps, that is the most unsettling lesson of all. Because the people with the most power are not always the ones standing on a stage. Sometimes, they are sitting quietly in a private room, watching numbers move across a screen, waiting for the next opportunity. And sometimes, the most powerful decision they can make is deciding what not to control. The Valerius estate still stands today, hidden behind the mountains. There are no signs, no tourist attractions. No giant golden letters spelling the family name. Only a long private road disappearing into the forest. At the end of that road is the Atlas Room, the same room where every generation learns the family's history. But there is one new sentence written above the door. It was placed there by Adrian. It reads, "Power is not what you can take. Power is what you can choose to do with what you have." And that became the new secret of the Valerius family. Not that they ruled the world, but that they finally understood they did not have to.